Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. If you're a high school student gearing up for those big history exams and you need to absolutely master the Gulf War, you've landed in the exact right spot. Consider this your ultimate, highly structured study guide. We're going to take these complex historical events and break them down into super clear takeaways so you can walk into test day with total confidence. Let's get right into it.
Okay, here's our game plan for today. We'll cover why Middle East oil matters, the spark, which is the invasion of Kuwait, the 100-Hour War, the short and long-term effects, and we'll wrap it all up with a quick summary quiz to check your knowledge.
Section 1. Why Middle East oil matters.
To really understand this conflict, we gotta start with the geography. The Middle East, which includes Southwest Asia and Egypt, is incredibly diverse. We're talking about a region home to Arabs, Persians, Turks, and Israelis. But here's the crazy thing. Prior to World War II, this massive region was barely a blip on the radar for American policymakers. So it begs the question, right? What exactly changed? Why did the US suddenly start pouring intense involvement, massive amounts of money, and serious military hardware into this specific part of the globe during the second half of the 20th century?
Well, it really boils down to two massive global shifts. First, the world realized that the Middle East sits on a truly huge percentage of the globe's oil reserves. And a rapidly industrializing US? Yeah, they desperately needed that oil. Second, you have the Cold War. Under the 1957 Eisenhower Doctrine, the U.S. essentially pledged military aid to any Middle Eastern country fighting off communism. Because of that, American money and weapons just started flooding into the region.
Moving on to Section 2, the spark, invading Kuwait. Flash forward to August 1990. The Iraqi dictatorship led by Saddam Hussein makes a massive, highly aggressive move. Picture the setup here. Iraq, which is already totally rich in oil, decides to invade its much smaller neighbor to the south, Kuwait, specifically to seize their massive oil reserves too. Now, this invasion didn't just affect Kuwait. It literally sent shockwaves around the entire globe. The immediate, terrifying thought was, what if Iraq doesn't stop there? If they pushed forward and took Saudi Arabia next, Saddam Hussein would effectively control the vast majority of all Middle Eastern oil. And because of that heavy U.S. reliance on the region's resources that we just talked about, American policy dictated a really swift response to protect those global oil supplies.
Section 3. The 100-Hour War. It is super important to remember that not everyone in the United States was totally on board with rushing into war. Right at home, citizens were protesting, carrying banners that claimed this intervention wasn't really about liberation, but was just trading blood for oil. It's a great historical reminder that military action almost always sparks some very serious domestic debate. Despite the debates at home, the geopolitical wheels were turning incredibly fast. Just look at the timeline. Following the invasion in August 1990, President George H.W. Bush successfully asked the UN to authorize war. By January 1991, Congress formally approved the use of military force, though, fun fact, it wasn't actually a formal declaration of war. Then, in February, a U.S.-led coalition launched this devastating, lightning-fast ground campaign called the 100-Hour War, and it absolutely crushed the Iraqi army. Once boots actually hit the ground, the sheer scale of the U.S.-led coalition was mind-blowing. We're talking massive tanks and heavy anti-aircraft weapons rolling right across the desert sand. They had overwhelming technological and numerical superiority, and that is exactly how the coalition secured such a decisive victory in barely over 4 days. Which brings us to Section 4, short and long-term effects. Make sure you're paying attention here, guys, because this is huge for your exams. In the short term, the primary goal was absolutely achieved. Kuwait was successfully liberated from Iraqi occupation. But this massive deployment also created a permanent U.S. military footprint in the Middle East, which fundamentally changed global geopolitics forever. On top of that, the UN handed down some incredibly strict orders demanding the total dismantling of Iraqi weapons of mass destruction, or WMD programs. There was also another immediate and frankly horrific short-term effect, a total environmental catastrophe. As the Iraqi forces retreated, they deliberately set fire to Kuwaiti oil wells. Immense, apocalyptic clouds of thick smoke billowed up from the burning wells, literally turning the desert sky pitch black and causing untold ecological damage. But looking long-term, the end of the Gulf War wasn't actually the end of the story. It kicked off a massive geopolitical chain reaction. Step 1, the U.S. stayed heavily engaged in the region to enforce that UN disarmament and patrol a no-fly zone over Iraq. Step 2, this constant enforcement led to repeated military clashes and bombings throughout the 1990s. And finally, step 3, this ongoing tension, especially over the unresolved WMD issues, escalated directly into the much larger 2003 Iraq War. All right, section 5, knowledge check, summary quiz. Let's see what you learned.
Okay, we pulled a practice question right from the exam materials for you to test yourselves. Here it is. In 1991, one of the reasons President George H.W. Bush committed United States troops to the Persian Gulf War was to,
and here are your options. Is it 1, maintain trade through the Suez Canal, 2, fulfill NAFTA obligations, 3, contain the spread of communism in the Middle East, or 4, assure the flow of Middle East oil? Take a second. Think back to our discussion on the Eisenhower Doctrine and those core U.S. policy goals. Got it? Lock in your answer. If you guessed number 4, you absolutely nailed it. While containing communism was definitely an earlier Cold War priority, by 1990, the immediate driving force behind the Gulf War was protecting global oil supplies from Saddam Hussein. And honestly, that leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to chew on. Given the massive shift towards renewable energy we're seeing today, how much does resource dependency still drive global conflict in the 21st century? Thanks for joining this explainer. Keep up the great studying, and you are totally going to crush that exam.